2 decades ago, South Africa's Department of Basic Education embarked on an ambitious journey to revolutionize the education sector through technology. Now, as the world embraces digital learning, the DBE seeks to revamp its e-learning strategies. As technology continues to reshape the education landscape, the aim is to breach the digital divide and is gearing up. Despite years of efforts, e-learning adoption remains sluggish and raises hopes for improved implementation. And now we joined virtually by Dr Corrin Varady, the CEO of IDEA Group, to talk about e-learning and how it can improve learning. A very good morning to you, Doc. Thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Now, as a conversation starter, let's talk about what the key factors are, in terms of hindering effective e-learning implementation in South African schools.
I mean, there's no doubt that infrastructure, so the devices, connectivity and the ability for us to spread that wide across the country has been a big blocker. But I think it's more about a mindset. We need to start thinking about what does educational technology mean in the lives of teachers and students, and not just that this ed tech is a device, is a computer. Because I think we're a bit blocked around why and how we're going to use technology to improve our schools and our e-learning programs. There's so much fear to believe that actually maybe technology is going to replace us. Maybe actually that's going to threaten our jobs. And actually, I think we need to start thinking about how does this make it better for our students and better for our teachers to be able to be in our schools.
And having said that, how will the new guidelines then address the existing challenges and improve outcomes?
Look, I think the guidelines will be a framework for the provinces to be able to understand and to prioritise both budget and also how they see it in the programmatic sense. So for a long time, we've seen, we know we've got to have CAPS delivery and the curriculum delivery improvements. We know assessment frameworks. So now at least e-learning is coming into the fray as being a central tenet of what provinces, communities and districts are going to be really adopting. And I think the other thing it's going to show is that it is a mandated professional development program. We are here to support teachers, knowing that we're walking into a digital economy and into a digital education sector. And that means that we're going to have to prioritise resources when it comes to assisting our teachers to be a part of that journey.
In as much as, we're now living in an era of, the fourth industrial revolution, and we need to ensure that whatever is implemented is in line with the educational policies for that particular country. So how do the guidelines then align with the policies and international best practices?
Well, with international best practices, we know actually if we were to look at industry and understand where we're going in terms of global digital economies, we need to be making sure that our students are far more advanced than just digitally literate. They need to be sitting at a place where they understand that ICT and technology, IT, has been infused and integrated into their lives. If it hasn't already, actually, I think at some level, what we don't realize is that technology is influencing our lives on a daily basis in every other way. So why shouldn't it in the education space as well? I do think that even though we're going to be creating guidelines and frameworks, we've always got to be conscious of how does that get executed when it gets to the child? Because the student is at the center of this, but the provinces in and of themselves are all very unique. So we're going to be trying to solve it with global best practices, but having to have a very provincial and community-driven approach. Because if we have a one-size-fits-all approach, and we know that there are provinces from Eastern Cape, which was historically considered rural, very large territory to live around, or we're going to have very urban areas that we're going to be delivering e-learning. They're two very different use cases, and therefore we have to think about it in a different way.
Now, Dr. Varady, just going through the Journal of Education and E-Learning Research penned by Victor Virimai Mugobo from the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, who says that, who conducted a study and they found that the lack of access to devices, the high cost of internet access and a perceived lack of interest amongst teachers and perceived ineffectiveness are the key challenges to e-learning adoption in South African schools. So, having said that, what provisions are made for infrastructure development and digital accessibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the challenges, if we rely purely on an online or high bandwidth, connected environment, is that is going to mean that we can't deliver. We have to be thinking around hybrid or offline solutions as well. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be forward thinking and saying that we need to lay more cables and see more LAN adoption in schools so that we see high band internet across the board. But I do think that we need to know that internet cannot be our blocker. So therefore, we have to be looking at how do we deliver digital education in an offline space as well. It's absolutely possible. I think the device delivery is a challenge, but we need to be looking at what we can optimize or utilize that is already in our schools.
Yeah.
Waiting for 100% of our schools to get a device per child is possibly not realistic. We have to get the model right first. So I don't believe that infrastructure is actually the blocker. To your latter point, though, the adoption of both the teachers in terms of appetite, demand, and I actually think it comes down to professional development, is fundamentally that we have not spoken to our teachers and understood what is it that they want that would help them with their jobs as we go along. And I think if that is at the core of what our e-learning policies are, we'll see that adoption and engagement increases.
And what innovative partnership models can be explored beyond device donation and software provision?
I mean, I've always advocated for the fact that public-private partnership is very important when we start talking about innovation facing into a public sector space. And that's a challenge. The education sector has not had a PPP model that has really worked when it comes to e-learning. And that's from both sides. I think that there needs to be a much greater roundtable, and certainly that there needs to be dialogue that is created about what the different roles are when it comes to private and then to public partnership. Public sector sets frameworks and guidelines, as we've been discussing. It certainly sets the policies, the priorities, and why we need to be doing what we're doing. But in an innovation and technology context, we know that private sector has the appetite, the demand, the needs, and actually the drivers to be able to see this becoming more future forward. So I think we need to look at how do we split those roles and how do we make sure that we're sitting at the table and having a conversation. I think the new minister has actually said, we need to be re-looking at what models of public-private partnership would actually be, but there are provinces that are doing it already. The Eastern Cape, in a recent summit that they had, actually welcomed private sector to the table and said, we need you to be here to help us with innovation. And I think that's a really new and forward-thinking approach.
And from your perspective, any opportunities out there for peer-to-peer learning and knowledge sharing between industry and educational professionals?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is across the board. We need to be opening up the dialogue, and private sector has to be listening to public sector more. We need to understand and we need to really support rather than necessarily detract or compete with what government is doing. But I think also, public sector certainly would be great if we were sitting and working together to be able to take the best of the pockets of excellence that we do have in the country. We have some academic and institutional excellence that are happening in our schools right now. We need to take that model and we need to work out how do we actually flush that across the country.
Yeah. And then as a closing, what role do you think partnerships play in promoting the STEM education system and career pathways?
I think they are critical, but I think we've got to define what partnership is. There's been a number of provinces recently that are saying partnerships are the bedrock of our province. And the challenge that came out of that was that actually what they were saying was they wanted more free pilots and they wanted more products that were being, and solutions that were being dumped into the province. That's not going to solve us. What we need to be doing is strategically aligning key solutions so that we're actually meeting the needs of the student. And that comes from both a provincial and a national government point of view, but partnerships, defining what that means between both the partner and the public sector departments is going to be key as we see the next 5 years in development of the e-learning strategies. All
right, Dr. Varady, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was Dr. Corrin Varady, CEO of Idea Group, talking to us about empowering education through innovative partnerships, shaping a much brighter future together.